Welcome to Autotown. From the factory floor to the C-suite to the dealership lot, everyone is welcome in Autotown, a place to go for insights and analysis of what's happening in the auto industry. I'm your host, Jamie Butters. Hey, I'm Jamie Butters. It's my honor to welcome you to Autotown. Autotown is your place for insights about the auto industry, representing all of its constituents. From the factory floor to the C-suite to the dealership lot, everyone is welcome in Autotown. Autotown is brought to you in part by Aumovio, a global top-tier auto supplier. Riding shotgun with me this week as my guest co-host is Dan Shine. He's a senior editor at Automotive News, and he works with reporters on the retail team who cover finance and insurance, service and parts, and used cars. Dan, welcome to Autotown.
Jamie, great to be with you.
So much fun to have you here. A little later, we're going to stop at the coffee shop for a chat with Curbee CEO Amit Chandarana about dealerships offering mobile service. They can change your oil in your driveway. And in the Town Hall segment, for 4th of July, we're going to ask you all what you think about vehicles that are made in America. But first, Dan and I are going to take a quick drive around the block and talk about the latest in the industry. Polestar, banned after 2026. They're going to stop selling new vehicles when these 2026 models run out. The company is controlled by Li Shufu's Geely Holding, and it failed to win approval to sell cars because of their reliance on Chinese technology. The brand's 32 U.S. dealers accounted for only about 6% of global sales. They'll continue to provide access to the service network, according to Reuters, which also reported that the company will not appeal the decision. This all goes back to a Commerce Department adopted rule under President Joe Biden. It's been maintained by the Trump administration that starting with this 2027 model year, no vehicles can be sold that have connected vehicle hardware or software that comes from China, Russia, North Korea, or Iran. It basically means China. The other places don't do that stuff. Polestar is based in Sweden. It was spun out of Volvo, which is also controlled by Li Shufu and Geely Holdings. But Volvo has reportedly gotten clearance to sell 2027 models, although there's some ambiguity around that. Dan, these Polestar dealers, they've got to be pretty bummed.
I think they're probably surprised too. It's like Trump undid everything Biden, did, and then there's like one thing he left. One thing he left alone. It's like, oh, wait a minute. They were kind of blindsided by this. I think like you mentioned, Volvo getting the okay. I think it was back in May. I think they kind of thought maybe we're okay, we're safe. And so they were really kind of shocked by this development. There were, one in Pennsylvania was, planning an expansion, building a bigger showroom because he was doing great business. So I think they were just kind of really devastated by this. And, one of them kind of voiced, concern, like just kind of be in the middle of this kind of like a political or governmental kind of decision made it especially tough. He said that they just would rather want to sell cars.
Yeah.
So it's been tough for them.
They didn't have very many dealers, but the ones they had, it seemed like they were really hungry. They were eager to prove something, to give a go with this brand, and so to have it come out from under them is rough.
Yeah, there was one dealer that was just absolutely loved the brand, loved the company, loved the vehicles. It was really excited about the new lineup of cars coming through. So, and said he was doing great business. They were a popular vehicle, and so again, this makes it really devastating for them.
Yeah. But then again, if the Chinese cars aren't safe for Americans to be on the roads, that might make sense. And also there is this issue that people talk about Chinese being uncompetitive, unfair. One company that's felt that strongly is Volkswagen. Globally, they're really hurting. In China, VW was once very large alongside GM. And in Europe, of course, VW is the biggest automaker, and the Chinese brands keep taking an ever larger slice of that market. Now Manager Magazine is reporting the company is planning to cut 100,000 jobs over the next few years. But it's hard to say if they can even do it, right, Dan? I mean, the structure of the company kind of makes it hard to make changes.
I think the theme of the show today is government and intervention in automotive. Yeah, the government, especially Lower Saxony, where
it's local government,
more so
than federal.
Right? Yeah. Exactly, that's true. They control a lot of. They own 20%, I think, of Volkswagen. So they have a lot of say in what the company does. They have a board that, half the members are labor leaders. So they have a lot to say. So it's very tough for the automaker to, when they think they want to right size their company and make some cuts to make them more profitable or make them more competitive in the marketplace. And they're running up against forces that won't let them do that.
Yeah. I'm sorry to keep taking it back to China, but that is sometimes the problem there. Maybe the federal government wants to see consolidation, get it from 100 plus brands down to, 9 or 10 or 12. But the regional banks, the regional governments don't want their local automakers to go away, so they prop them up, and that's a challenge. But you look at with Volkswagen, it is a different structure, and they, I don't know, they had been looking at doing 50,000 job cuts. They saw that wasn't going to be enough, even doubled. I just don't know. Volkswagen has 660,000 employees, and it sold about 9 million vehicles last year. Toyota sold more than 11 million vehicles with fewer than 400,000 employees. I mean, that's just some tough math for VW to overcome.
Yeah, I was not good at math. That's why I became a writer. But even this math that I can even figure out and say it doesn't add up.
It's very expensive. Maybe this one is a change of gears here. Record high average marketed price. And every morning lately, when I open up my iPad, this is after I've had my first cups of coffee, I check the gas prices on AAA, I check the price of oil, and I go to autonews.com. You might have heard of that website.
Yep.
I go there. And
great website.
And that's where I check the average marketed price of vehicles listed for sale at dealerships across the U.S. Catalyst IQ scrapes all the websites every night and gathers all the MSRPs individually at the VIN level, subtracts out the promoted discounts, and calculates the average marketed price. It soared to a record during the pandemic, and then, despite all the tariffs over the past year, it's kind of held steady until this year, until these last few months. It's been ticking upward as the months move along and everyone kind of tests what they can get away with. Then this weekend, it topped the COVID peak. And today, we're recording this on Monday, June 29th. It's at a record 51,940, so almost 52,000. The average is up only 300 over the past month, but more than 2,400 over the past year.
I wish my 401k had this kind of trajectory. Yeah, it's if people aren't talking about AI in automotive, they're talking about affordability, and that's kind of the other A word. And it's tough. It's tough on consumers who need a vehicle for work or for family things, and they are faced with these prices, not just vehicle prices, but the insurance for that vehicle and the gas to put in that vehicle. And then even, the money you need to go to the grocery store and, eggs and milk and all those kind of things. Consumers very strained. And yeah, I mean, we saw kind of the Cox, automotive mid-year report. There's still the auto market is still resilient. There are people, I think just kind of swallow hard and will buy that new vehicle despite the price. But you have to wonder how high before people really kind of say no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the average marketed price it's a useful number, and especially because it is updated each day, people can still negotiate down from there. That's why average transaction prices can be a little different than that. But I think the benefit for the industry and what we keep seeing playing out, and it's in Cox's analysis and others, is that the industry is more and more focused on the top quintile, the 60 million Americans who have, the highest income and the most assets on Wall Street, and the higher gas prices and even the higher price of housing just doesn't hit them the same. Maybe they're moving from, Escalades to Equinoxes, but they're still buying when they need to.
Right. Along with not being good at math, I wasn't good at economics either, but I do understand the K-shaped economy, and that's what we have. We just have a lot of haves and some have-nots who, the lower tier segments are people who just are subprime buyers, and maybe a little bit of above subprime, who just are completely out of the marketplace, and that's not good for automakers.
Well, it's you've got 1 million people priced out of new vehicles. Basically, the market is 1 million fewer sales a year than it was before the pandemic and the shift in prices. But we also lost so much production. There's not a lot of, fairly new used inventory, so those prices are up higher, and then people get pushed down And so, yeah, if you were buying 10-year-old vehicles before, you might be looking at a 15, almost 20-year-old vehicle now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing to see that some dealerships are not maybe offering 15 or 20-year-old vehicles, but 9-year-old vehicles on the lot being sold. Just the cars are being made better, and so they can last longer if
Yep.
well maintained. But you would never see that.
It's
5 years ago,
Yeah.
10 years ago, this would be unheard of.
And some of those second-tier leases even on older used vehicles.
Right.
It's pretty remarkable. All right, well, thanks, Dan. That was fun drive around the block. Next up, we're going to stop at the coffee shop for a chat with Curbee CEO Amit Chandarana. Then we'll go to the town hall to discuss this week's poll. Welcome back to Autotown. I'm Jamie Butters. Riding shotgun as my co-host is Dan Shine, senior editor at Automotive News. We're stopping at the Autotown coffee shop to chat with Amit Chandarana, CEO of Curbee, which helps auto dealers launch and manage mobile service. Amit, I did a story for Business Week, almost a decade ago. They were integrating Google into their cars and looking to help customers with parking and remote service. But it just didn't take off. I don't know if the cost didn't quite work or what, but why do you think mobile service is really gaining traction now when it maybe didn't in the past?
Yeah, I think it's a basic principle that most people want things to come to them versus having to go to it. So if we were to remove ourselves from the automotive industry in and of itself, I think we compare the likes of Uber and DoorDash, Domino's and Chipotle, and all these other things in the world, Safelite, which is adjacent automotive, BarkBus. I mean, you can't go in my neighborhood without seeing somebody having their pet grooming come to them now. I think those being indicators basically show you those same human beings want that same type of service when it comes to their vehicle also. And we use this DoorDash example pretty often, but it's funny, I think just a couple of days ago, they announced that they're now going to start delivering car parts, auto parts. So the DoorDash, when it comes to food, is no longer just a food thing. They literally have recognized the same thing that we have. It's like, oh, this automotive industry is pretty huge. We should get in.
Yeah. Maybe your auto dealers should start bringing Big Macs.
That's right? Why not just go ahead and bring the Big Mac? I mean, if you go read some of these books, especially like The Algorithm with John and these guys at Tesla, they had coffee machines in the Teslas when they went out to customers.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask. We write a lot about in automotive news about the technician shortage, and some dealerships can't get enough wrench turners in their bays. And now, if you're going to expand into mobile service, you've got to find more, and then you also have to find the right candidate who's going to be kind of like the face of your dealership out in public and be that kind of that customer facing person, the advisor and the mechanic. How do you help dealerships kind of with that question, and is that something that you think is slowing down? Maybe would be a wider adoption of mobile service at dealerships.
I don't. I steal a line from Ed Roberts at Bozard Ford. We don't have a technician hiring problem. We have a technician training concern. And you solve for that, then you basically start creating a ladder in a manner that is progressive, right? I mean, the reason of a technician shorting is just, we don't want to pay folks. We'll pay them. If you want to give them a progress ladder to their career, they're likely to stick around. So we often come up with 3 suggestions when it comes to technicians. Number 1, partner with any local high school, trade school, college, where there are technicians who are ready to come out. As you know, technicians sometimes have to have $10,000 to $15,000 of tools to become a technician. A lot of these mobile service vehicles are already upfitted with everything you need to go out. So the barrier to entry just gets lower. So just in basic economic principles, when you lower a barrier to entry, more will come through the gate. Number 2, go down to your technicians in the shop and tell them that you're going to do mobile service and you want to hire some of their friends. And then come back 72 hours later and see what happens when they say, yeah, Bill's going to do it on Friday, Mary's going to do it on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and Amit's going to do it on Tuesdays. There's this ability to create a hybrid work environment. So you can still rub elbows and learn with each other, but you still get the ability to have a hybrid work environment where you get outside and get outdoors and go be a part of the community. And then third, it is a well-known trick where HVAC technicians, electricians, plumbers, all of these individuals who quote unquote know how to talk to a customer are readily available, especially with some of the consolidation that takes place. And now you're really teaching how to do an oil change in about 3 or 4 weeks. So if you put those out there, most of the dealerships we talk to do no longer have a technician shortage, quote unquote, but they just have a training ladder concern. I'll put a pin in that one and to go to your question about the technician having to gain a new skill set. We do these trainings every single month with about 20 General Motors dealerships every single month called a Jumpstart. They always bring the technicians. And we talk about these technicians like they're these alien human beings who have never seen the sun and like they can't talk to people. And when we say these things like, how can you have a technician talk to a customer? You mean the guy who and gal who operates life every single day just like everybody else and gets through the day with talking to other humans? So I think we need to sort of tamper down that misnomer that they shouldn't be talking to customers. I think it's more clear to the fact that when you go to see your doctor, you're really excited when you see the doctor. The nurse and the PA and the receptionist and the insurance collector are really just steps in the process. But when your doctor gets to you, that's the person with the knowledge, and that's really what you want transferred. So I think customers are actually more excited about talking to technicians than they are anybody else.
Yeah, good point. Good point. One of the big advantages of mobile service, of course, is being able to grow that repair business without having to, build another building. What kind of do people have to charge more? Is there often a convenience service that goes with it? And what kind of ROI then does the dealership get out of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of a coin flip. I'll go back to a couple things here. It is super expensive to add service base. It also takes a long time because you have to get planning and permit and land. And to add a service bay, you're looking at probably 3 to 4 months, if not $200,000 to $250,000 all in. A mobile service vehicle can be upfitted for less than $20,000 and hit the road in about 2.5 to 3 weeks. And a mobile service vehicle is the equivalent of about 2.5 service bays. So when someone asks about the ROI, I think we just did some simple math there. You need $250,000 in 3 to 4 months to be able to generate 2.5 jobs per day. A mobile service vehicle in $20,000 in about 2.5 weeks is giving you 2.5 service bays. So I sometimes push back to folks and say, how do you not make money with mobile service? Because if you actually take the COGS or your cost of goods sold and your inputs down, because you're not paying for the 8 people that touch every single service appointment when it comes to a dealership, and you reassign the fact that it's only 1 or 2 people that are really involved with mobile service, I push back to how you don't make money, number one. Number two, when the question often comes up, should I charge a premium for mobile service? And I usually do what is a very annoying thing, which is answer the question with a question. And I say, hey, Jamie, when you put in your new service bay, how much should you start charging customers for that new service bay? That uncomfortable silence is because, that uncomfortable silence is they sort of sit back in the chair and they think for a second, well, I generate revenue from this service bay. It's good for me. It increases my retention. So I'm not going to charge a customer for the thing that I want from them. But for some reason, when it's mobile service, which is, again, about 10x cheaper, we seem to think that we have to afford that thing that has a lower cost of good and is about 10x cheaper. But with that said, we're not here to tell somebody what to do. Going to Chipotle and ordering a burrito costs X and then it costs Y when it gets delivered. So if the nature of the customer is that they're willing to pay a little bit more for convenience, I'm not opposed to dealerships charging, $9.99 mobile service charge for $200 oil change. I think customers are willing to pay it. I think the dealerships ultimately have to make a decision on whether or not that's something that's important to them, or is the retention or the long-term ability to sell them a car or acquire used vehicles more important to them.
It's remarkable, like you said. I guess, within the simpler work that tends to be done, as I think you've estimated, basically 3 out of every 8 jobs can be done remotely. If your cost is actually less and you're providing it, you can tell people, oh, maybe we have a $10 fee, but we're going to waive it for you because you're a loyal customer. You're making more money, but you're really giving them an extra service. You're buying them time in their lives.
Yeah, I get the car dealership's perspective on this, right? This is a newer entry per se. It's a different business line, so they want to sort of mitigate risk. They want to cover. So I totally get it. We've seen a lot of dealers, such as the Finley Automotive in Plano and Dallas area. They started off by charging customers. They did an elasticity test, and they tested what that pressure was like. And they've gotten to a point now, because their mobile service units across their 3 or 4 dealerships are fully profitable, they're accretive to the business, they're adding incremental customers who they haven't seen in a couple of years. So they no longer charge anything whatsoever. And they really do say out loud that it was a test, but what they've proved out that they don't need to charge for this thing by any means whatsoever. They're getting what they want, which is the loyalty from the customer.
So we see you at different conferences, NADA and Autotown, and you talk with dealers all the time. What are the things that they bring up when they say, "Oh boy, I'm really thinking about this. It seems like I really should be in this," but is it, the cost of upfitting the van? Is it finding the people? Is it the logistics, the scheduling? What is it about the whole idea of mobile service that you hear from dealers that they say, "I'd like to, but..."
It goes back to the Who Moved My Cheese book. It's just the uncomfortable path to change management. We spend a significant amount of time. Right? We're a pretty straightforward, simple software company, but we spend a significant amount of time operationalizing the dealership's mobile service. So everything from how to acquire technicians to using our preferred upfit partnership network to upfit a vehicle, and I would say the majority of our dealer success team spends the time on marketing and change management. For some reason, the most profitable part of a car dealership that touches the most customers still give broom closet approach to when it comes to marketing. And so what we often do is we spend a significant amount of time getting the dealer principal, general manager, and the GSM and the F&I manager involved with the marketing service and fixed ops in general, because it really does create their flywheel of vehicle acquisition and an opportunity to sell customers a new vehicle. So whether or not it's marketing best practices or tips and tricks, or it's just taking someone through a Simon Sinek video of change management, like, we're about to move your cheese, so get prepared for that. And then we sort of go through the 7 steps of change management, and we spend a significant time on, as well as showing them how software works too.
I know you've been growing really rapidly, and maybe even some competitors have as well, but I'm curious, where does the business kind of go from here in the longer term? I don't know, if you have 2 or 5 years of growing 12x, you're going to run out of places to grow. Is the aim to get acquired by one of the bigger platforms, or can Curbee grow into a bigger platform of itself where you're offering other services like detailing or solar panel installation?
That's a good question. We don't have necessarily an exit strategy. So there's not a target that we are aiming towards when it comes to what's going to take place in regards to the outcome of the company in, year 2, 3, or 4. Really, we just got to keep building the right product and the right services to serve the dealer that serves the customer. Given the fact that we're the software company, we no longer have tools or trucks or technicians. We're certainly consulting a lot of dealerships on where they can expand the business. And we've seen that. We've seen dealerships go from, I think you mentioned it earlier, we've done the analysis, about 37% of what can be done at the shop can be done in the field on the go via mobile. There are some dealers that are starting to extend this out, right? They're saying, I don't want SafeLight to be able to be the only one in my neighborhood that installs a windshield. So we're going to start adding that capability into the vehicle. Some of them may want to add car washes. Some of them may want to add the tire changing machine to the back of the Sprinter van so that they can own their business in these sorts. From a company standpoint, there's a lot of field here still. They give an estimate, between us and anybody else in the space, there's probably less than 10% penetration still of mobile service. And then there's some dealerships who are just taking a truck out every once in a while with a couple tools and knocking that out. So, to a certain degree, call it 10%, 15%, but there's a massive white space. There's a massive green field to begin with. What we're starting to get involved in is the OEM's conversations when it comes to mobile service. I think where it's going to lead us is better data integrations with manufacturers so that mobile service becomes just as seamless as some of the other parts of the business. For example, there are conversations with manufacturers right now with telematics, so that when there's a check engine light that goes off, the check engine light can be ran through an opcode analysis, which we see, to determine whether or not that service is a mobile-friendly service or not. And if so, then in your brand, if you will, you simply pop up the ability to have someone come out to you to take a look at the check engine light, or if it's just a TPMS sensor. So these are the things that are really arduous, right? Because there's just a ton of friction to be able to go to the dealership, which there's only 18,000 compared to the 300,000 independents. So it's arduous to have to go to the dealership. So if the dealership can come to you, that retention is recovered, more recalls can be completed, they're safer, and it will happen with just less friction. So I think that's some of the bend around the corner, if you will, or the look around the corner as to some of the things that are taking place. There's going to continue to be deeper and deeper integrations with parts and customer satisfaction and the recidivism of sales also.
Interesting stuff. Thank you so much, Amit. Appreciate having you here in Autotown. This was great.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it, guys.
The rest of you, don't go away. Dan and I will be right back at the Town Hall, which is all decked out in red, white, and blue. Hey, hey, and hear ye, hear ye. That's right, we're at the Autotown Town Hall. I'm Jamie Butters, and riding shotgun is my co-host, Dan Shine, senior editor at Automotive News. Saturday is the 4th of July, the United States semi-quincentennial. Wednesday is Canada Day, which is also the official USMCA review day. So it just seems like an appropriate time to ask what role patriotism plays in your vehicle choice. This week's question, what does Made in America mean to you? Anything assembled in the U.S.? Only UAW will do? There's no such thing, or it doesn't matter. Dan, do you have any initial thoughts when you hear this question?
First of all, I want to say July 4th is also my 29th wedding anniversary.
Hey, congratulations.
I lost my independence on Independence Day. Just kidding, Kim Shine. No, as a kid, who grew up in, suburban Detroit, surrounded by friends whose parents worked in the auto industry. And, back then, everything you saw in the neighborhood was one of the Detroit Three driving around. And so that was always kind of the mindset in our household. When I moved to Texas after college for a job, that was a lot different. There was some, unless it was an F-150 or a Silverado, there was a lot of, import foreign cars in Texas. And then, as I've kind of moved back to Detroit and sometimes, price becomes a thing. It's always made, I'm not necessarily care who makes it or where it's made. Is the price right? And it's a nice vehicle. And even if it's, we buy something from a Toyota store or something that, their employees are still, you got to get paid. They're getting a paycheck. So it's an interesting question. But, I just think people are evolving a little bit, and it's hard to say these days where, it might have an American nameplate on it, but it wasn't necessarily all American made.
That's always been the case to some extent,
Yeah.
Whether it was, well, at least since the UAW and the CAW split, but there's been, cars made in Canada since the 60s, cars made in Mexico to a growing extent, even by the domestic automakers. So the brand doesn't always tell you where it's made. Although I think around here, like you said, in your neighborhood, people probably cared more about the ownership than the manufacturing to a certain extent. And, it's funny, you were in Dallas, you mentioned Texas, Dallas is now basically Toyota's home.
Right.
Their headquarters are in Plano in suburban Dallas. So very big Toyota influence, as well as their big San Antonio truck plant, a huge influence on Texas. I do want to point out, a friend of the show, Jan Griffiths, likes to say that there is no purely U.S. vehicle, and people should maybe stop trying to look for one, except, of course, that manufacturers need to try to minimize tariffs, so you can't ignore where things come from. I do want to give folks a heads up. One of our guests on the WJR show, Saturday morning at 7 a.m. this week, on the 4th of July, is going to be Patrick Masterson. He's the lead researcher for Cars.com's American Made Index. So we'll put a little science behind everyone's opinions. That should be fun. But I think to your point, you mentioned the Texas experience. Like I say, before I came to Detroit in 2000, I lived in America. And out there in America, most people just want the best value for their money, whether it's made in Kentucky by non-union labor or it's in Detroit by UAW. If it's a car that they like, if it speaks to them, satisfies their needs, to get a fair price, they're going to be happy with it.
Yeah, I think that's what consumers are looking for. Give me a nice vehicle at the right price, and I'm in.
Well, I can't wait to see what the Autotownies have to say. Everyone go to the Autotown with Jamie Butters LinkedIn page to cast your vote. Leave a comment, and I may read it on the air this Saturday morning. Autotown Radio is every Saturday at 7 a.m. on WJR 760. Thank you all for visiting Autotown today. Thank you to Dan Shine for joining me in the studio, and Amit Chandarana for joining us remotely from Los Angeles. The show was produced by Matthew Peach at M1 Studios. Original artwork is by Shelley Trombley. Maya Keener is on social media. The theme song bangs. It was composed by Jonathan Franco, and thank you to Stellantis for the Hemi engine exhaust notes that are part of it. A very special thank you to our sponsor, Aumovio, a top-tier supplier. If your business is interested in becoming a sponsor, please contact Autotown's executive producer, James Davies. You can be an active citizen of Autotown. Follow the show on LinkedIn to participate in the weekly poll. You can also follow Autotown on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, whatever is your favorite social network. Audio can also be found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And of course, you can visit Autotown every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. on 760 WJR in Detroit. I'm Jamie Butters.